All right, confession time. Time to own up. When I was young, I dreamed of being a big filmmaker. You may have heard that if you've listened to previous episodes or read the blog. But I wasn't just content being any old actor or filmmaker, director, writer. I had to be all three, and I had to be the best of all time. And my dream, not even dream, but really expectation, was that I was going to, at the very least, win the Academy Award for Best Actor, Best Original Screenplay, and Best Director for the same film on the same night. And I was going to hit that milestone hard before I was 30. Of course, and I was the underdog story too. That was important. It had to be me, this guy from Australia, going over to Hollywood and making it happen. Well, I'm not a famous or unfamous actor, director. Don't direct films. I direct other things. I'm a writer, but I haven't written any screenplays. I'm here. I'm hosting this episode of the With Joe Wehbe Podcast. So it's not nothing, but I'm probably, I think, more than 12,000 kilometers away from Hollywood last time I looked it up. But I had this huge expectation. You can't criticize a dreamer, right? All right, let's talk about this today. Let's follow on from what we were saying about, we did 2 episodes really on the happiness curve. And we talked about kind of what's going on there. Why life tends to get better after midlife. But we didn't really unpack it. We didn't really get down to the core. If you remember 2 episodes ago, I talked about the story of my friend Pat. I talked about this, I don't know if you'd even remember this, but this speech he did that he found, and he said, simpler times, and we're reminiscing on being younger without as many responsibilities in the world. And it's this narrative, isn't it, that things don't go the way we expect. And that's upsetting. It so turns out that that's probably the reason for the happiness curve. That is the best theory. And the blog post for this I've got to open in front of me now on the website is called The Expectations Gap. I'll explain. But in particular, the idea comes from a study, an article by a guy called Hans Schwant and colleagues called Unmet Expectations as an Explanation for the Age U-Shape in Wellbeing. Now, what I've got open in front of me, which you'll find on the blog post for that on the website, www.withjoewehbe.com, because it's very hard to convey this as powerfully without the graph in front of you, but I'll do my best, is what Schwant did was this study where they basically measured the expectations of future well-being and current well-being for people over a spread of ages. So how happy they expected to be in 5 years' time, and then their well-being basically now. And what they found is that for young people, they had expectations of well-being that were higher than their expectations now. So for example, when I was at school with my friend Pat and everyone else, expecting life after school to be a breeze and to become this out of nowhere with no training, hit the big stage in a click of the wrist, filmmaker, an actor. I had these very grand expectations for the future, right? And I expected not just to achieve great things, very specifically, I expected to feel really happy and have a higher sense of well-being. So if I rated current well-being as an 8, I expected future well-being to be a 10. That's basically what happened. Now, what the study found, which is the most interesting part, is that the elderly, those after midlife, expected their happiness to be lower in the future compared to what it was now. 2 episodes ago, I talked about that's our expectation, right? That happiness curve over time will be like a downward ski slope, but it's not. That slope goes down, but then it bends back up like a half pipe. It's that expectation gap. So just to give you an example, it's like an older person on average, or in this study, may have reported being an 8 out of 10 now, but expected to be a 6 out of 10 in 5 years' time. Now, what do we know about when you've got low expectations? It's much harder to disappoint you, right? I got one friend in mind. He comes to mind who always oversells things. He's always like, "Oh, this idea is going to be the best idea in the world," or this movie is the best movie, or this book's the best book you've ever read, and it oversells it. I come in with these high expectations, and there's nowhere to go but down, basically. Whereas I love the undersell. Like, read this book, watch this movie, check out this business plan. And then it leaves the expectations low so you can be really impressed and excited about it. The thing doesn't have to change. It could be the same book, but who it's marketed by, to me, changes the whole experience. Now, my friend who's overly optimistic is a pretty good and up and coming, in my opinion, entrepreneur. So it's interesting. It's this optimism bias. When we're young, we tend to have these grand expectations for the future. It's an optimism bias is particularly prevalent in young people. People, especially my age. I'm in my mid-20s. By midlife, the two converge. And if you look at the graph, which I urge you to, from Schwant's study, midlife is the point, or around midlife, is the point where these gaps in expectations of how good I'm feeling now, how good I'm going to feel in the future, start to converge, come to a point, start to become the same, is when those expectations have been unmet for long enough that we start to learn that the solution is not telling ourselves, the solution for happiness and dealing with life is not telling ourselves that I'm going to be some big hot shot in 5 years' time. It's when you start to accept what life is like now and realize that it's good. Remember, I said it's a shift from aspiration to appreciation. That's what happens in midlife. That's why older people actually report higher well-being, despite declining health, despite having less to run on a clock, in theory. So this is obviously a theory, but there is obviously a lot of research behind it, and it's a pretty robust theory, and I do love talking about it because I feel like it fills so many gaps. And the irony of it filling so many gaps is that it is this experience we're having an expectations gap. That expectation I had when I left school, I made a big distinction. It wasn't as much a dream as it was an expectation. When you think about how powerful that is, not I want to do something, it's to say I won't be happy unless I'm this. And the problem is you don't have control over this. What you do have control over is how you look at what you have now. And this is why it's harder to be happy in a Western culture, where everything is encouraging you to look at what you could have and who you could be. But because you've listened to these podcasts in order like you're supposed to, you understand the minimum viable lifestyle, right? You learned that you need to appreciate now. When I read The Happiness Curve, when I had my experiences in Nepal, and when I learned that I could make do with for less, that's when I kind of packaged it all up together and decided to call it for myself the minimum viable lifestyle. Because I realized that I couldn't wait to midlife to appreciate what I had. It makes sense. I could do that now. It was cheap and easier. Now you'll see. So it's the whole thing about what does this mean? Can we not do things? You'll see from looking at my website, listening to this podcast, probably someone that people would describe as ambitious. And I do try things and I play. I just play. I have fun. I'm not sitting here like a monk in a temple, just trying to be zen. There's time and place for that, and there's a whole life for that for some people. There's a difference between dreaming and expecting. And a dream is just an incredible realization, but we need to be, I think, humble dreamers. But we need to be grounded in now. The quickest way to this good life, as I learned here, is like, I'm not going to wait till midlife for things to start getting better and to start appreciating. I'm going to do it now. I'm not going to expect things in the future or feel entitled to things anymore. But I'm going to still dream, because things can be better. Not just for me, but for those around me, more than anything else. So it's pretty powerful, and I think, what have we got? I think we will keep talking about the expectations gap and its permutations. But for now, I think you've had enough. But hopefully you've got something to go off there. You can look at gratitude. You can look at books like The Resilience Project. You can look at journaling as a practice and just daily gratitude exercises. You can continually remind yourself by using the minimum viable lifestyle, designing that for yourself and having a clear picture of, wow, my life is good now. It's very affordable. It's probably cheaper to have a good life than it is to have a bad life. You can do some of those tools to start protecting yourself against this expectations gap. You can start now. Now, there's probably other people you know that would benefit from that too. So don't forget to kind of open a door for them and let them know about this and discuss this with them, because after all, the best way to open 1,000 doors for you is to concentrate on opening doors for others. Thank you. This has been the With Joe Wehbe podcast, and we'll see you next time.